Welcome to On the Table with Ashley. This is episode 3 of our wellness series, where we take a deep dive into the true meaning of wellness, cutting through the noise of quick fixes and fleeting health trends to uncover what wellness truly looks like. Each episode, you'll hear from experts across different fields as they share how they approach health, from physical and mental health to holistic and alternative practices, to give you real, lasting ways to care for your mind, body, and spirit. Today, our guest is Dr. Crawford. Dr. Natalie Crawford is a double board-certified fertility specialist in Obstetrics and Gynecology, as well as Reproductive, Endocrinology, and Infertility. She's the co-founder of Fora Fertility in Austin and Pinnacle, a leadership community of women in medicine. Dr. Crawford also serves as a clinical assistant professor at Dell Medical School at the University of Texas. She's the host of the popular As a Woman podcast and the author of the upcoming book, The Fertility Formula. Having experienced infertility herself, Dr. Crawford combines evidence-based medicine with a holistic approach to empower and educate patients. Enjoy.
Dr. Crawford, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm thrilled to have you on our podcast and so look forward to talking with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So I always like to start hearing a little bit about where you grew up and what kind of kid you were when you were young.
I moved around a lot when I was little. So I was born in Dallas and moved around, lived in Texas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. I always say I grew up in Georgia. I graduated high school in Peachtree City, Georgia. And so that's kind of where my, most formative years were. And, we weren't a military family. My dad there were 3 girls. He really started at the bottom and worked really hard. And any promotion he got, we moved so that he could have more opportunity. But I was a very shy, bookworm child. I'm very introverted by nature, but I learned that when you move schools every year or multiple times in a year, you don't make friends unless you talk to people. And so I did have to learn at a younger age to really just be curious about people. That's all you have to be. It's not hard. It's just asking them about, who they are and what they're doing. And that really had brought me out of my shell. I always say I'm a different person because we went through all of that moving when I was young versus if I had just grown up in the same place, I'd probably be very different now.
Yeah, that's amazing. Almost everybody's favorite subject is themselves. So if you ask about them,
their favorite subject, right?
They're going to have something that they want to tell you. It's a good place to start. Do you still love to read?
I love to read and have a very bookish little daughter too, which is very funny. She's old enough now where we read the same books together, which is pretty funny. I love to read. And medical training, you just lose so much of yourself to learning to serve others and to trying to absorb all of this information about the body that is literally so life-saving and so important that I probably stopped reading for pleasure for almost a decade. And it wasn't until I had my kids in fellowship training that I found myself, up at different hours and breastfeeding and able to really go back to books for pleasure again and really find how much that is a stress relief for me to be able to escape to other worlds and how much I love it. And it's funny to talk to people who do love books, how so often we kind of lose our way from them because of life and then have to find our way back. I don't know if you love books, if you're like that or not.
I do love books. And actually right before this series on wellness, I've done a mini series on how to create a successful book club because I've actually never been able to create a successful book club, but I love to read. And like you, I've loved to read since I was a little girl. But I'm a big believer that we have seasons in our lives. And I definitely had a season when I was raising my family and working and really focused on my career where I didn't have time to read for pleasure. I was reading for work, but
Right.
I wasn't reading for pleasure. And now I'm doing that again. And I get so many recommendations. You'll see it's one of my questions at the end, but I always get recommendations from podcast guests. And it's so wonderful because I get this huge diversity and variety of books that I might not otherwise find.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I think it is very typical to have these seasons where there's like, if you are somebody who loves to read, there's a time in your life when you just don't have the time for it. And then when we come back to it, it's still so fulfilling. So I think you'll like that series. It'll be fun.
I can't wait.
So tell us, what first inspired you to become a doctor?
Oh, such a good question. I always wanted to be a physician. My grandfather was a psychiatrist and he loved his job and he thought being a physician was the best job in the world. You got to help people and understand the body, which is so complex. And I, at a young age, was like, that's what I will do. I also never gave much thought to what type of physician I would be, which is interesting. Like as a kid, it's just doctor. And then when I got into medical school, I said, oh, I'll figure it out as it goes. I actually loved every rotation in medical school and I matched into emergency medicine because it's a little bit of everything. And I love my ER colleagues and it was a great field and it was so wrong for me, so wrong for me. And it was the first time in my life I felt like I really made such a terrible mistake. I'm a type A, very big planner, and I love things to be perfect to a fault, right? And this was just so glaringly wrong. And I didn't know what to do. And I went to my program director, who was lovely. And he said, well, if you don't know what you want to do, if you want to finish the year out so you don't leave, your co-residents kind of in a lurch, like I'll be your biggest advocate and we'll find you where you want to go. I hate to lose you, but like, let's help you out. And that was such a gift to have somebody support you, in training, especially when you are leaving their program, that it really, one, showed me what real mentorship can look like and having somebody be an advocate for you and for finding your own way. But I really did a lot of deep introspective work at that time because the world told me that residency is just hard. You're not going to like any field. Just tough it out for 2 more years and you're done. And that was the constant message I got. I want to really be the expert on one topic instead of knowing a little bit about everything, which is just so incredible. I'd rather have this bank of knowledge that I know everything about a little. And that really dove me to women's health and my nerdy, bookish nature of puzzles and everything. I love hormones. I mean, your hormones are just such an intricate, beautiful system that are very complex. And I love that diagnostic challenge of trying to figure out what's going on underlying the surface. And so that's what really drew me into doing OBGYN and then doing 3 additional years of infertility training. If I had stayed in emergency medicine, as amazing as it can be, I know I would have burnt out and left because it wasn't really filling that fire for what I wanted as a doctor, right? And as a fertility doctor, it is the best and the worst job every single day. I get to know my patients. I get to walk with them on the journey, get to help them learn more about their body. When it's great, it's amazing. When it's bad, it's terrible. But it truly is being there for them in both those highs and those lows. And that's really what being a physician is to me. That's what I wanted out of the job. But it wasn't a direct road and was one of those kind of earlier stories to say, hey, you've got to really think about how you fit into the puzzle, right? I think so often we think about, I want to do this, and we don't really think about how that fits into who we are.
And I have 2 boys. They're teenagers. My older son is going off to college and starting to talk about like, what do you want out of life? And I think it's such an important lesson that you can always pivot because a lot of times we think we've invested so much, whether it's schooling or money or what have you, that we just have to stick it out. But that's not what life is about. It's about finding what brings us meaning and where we can also give the most. So you were able to find where you could give the most to your patients, and that's probably also giving the most to you.
I mean, you're so right. I love it.
So I think that you've shared your personal story pretty openly, but if you wouldn't mind sharing that as well, and if that was part of how you decided to go into women's health.
Yeah, no, actually, I experienced my own infertility journey and I had 4 pregnancy losses before I had my kids. I actually started having pregnancy loss during my 4th year, so my chief year of OBGYN residency. At that time, I had already gone through emergency medicine. I'd done 4 years of OB. I'd already matched into fertility. So I'd already decided that I loved fertility and was going to be a fertility doctor. Said, hey, this is the time. I matched into this competitive field. I'm going to start trying to get pregnant. And we started having pregnancy losses. And I was so unprepared. I had spent so long preventing pregnancy, trying to plan out the perfect moment in medical training. When can I do this? My husband and I had been together for a really long time at that point. And I think like everybody, we kind of take this pivot from I'm preventing to I'm now trying. And I was not really prepared for what that would look like, despite being an OBGYN. And when I had miscarriage after miscarriage, I had no idea what to do. And I went to my own doctor. I feel like something's wrong and kind of giving other symptoms that all seem vague and being told, that's all normal, or, just keep trying, not really being given any real answers, but also at the same time, not having any tests done, and understanding now like how wrong that was. And those losses continued into fertility fellowship. And I luckily got more testing done. I had more resources and got more testing done. And I really reached a breaking point. And this is probably why I'm on social media, because I just felt like, gosh, I don't have the answers that I'm looking for, even though I'm one of an OBGYN, right? How do I track my cycle? And am I timing intercourse right? And is my luteal phase okay? And are there foods that I could be eating or should be avoiding? Or should I take aspirin because I've had these pregnancy losses? And how many losses are too many? And really, these little questions that seem so basic, I was researching them on my own. And really that struck me as how wrong that was. And how much of the information I was shocked to find out about my cycle, about my own body, despite even the facts that I knew. And, that was a shared experience with every patient who sat across from me, who said, why didn't I know this information earlier? Why has nobody told me this? Why don't we talk about this information? Infertility fellowship is 3 years long. And so in those 3 years, a year and a half is research and a year and a half is clinical training. So they want us to be able to interpret literature, understand scientific studies. I love that because no field is advancing as quickly as IVF. It's amazing. Almost every fellow across the country does research on IVF. They look at embryos, they look at implantation. And I went to my fellowship director and said, I want to research natural fertility. And, that was like, why? That's not what we really do. You do IVF on the day-to-day. And I was very lucky and I chose my fellowship for a reason. I went to University of North Carolina and one of the top reproductive epidemiologists, she was there and she became my fellowship mentor. And she has the biggest cohort in the country looking at natural fertility, people's menstrual cycles and how different factors that make it more or less likely to get pregnant, and looking at environmental toxins and vitamin and nutrient deficiencies in your luteal phase. And I got my master's of science in clinical research and dove into natural research, like just on natural fertility, and really saying, you know what? I love IVF. I do it every day. It's an amazing technology that helps some people get pregnant who won't have success otherwise. I think that there's more we can do before that more people should understand their body well before that we should arm people with more information about the choices they're making and what that means for them, regardless of if they need IVF or not. These factors are at play. And that really changed my perspective on how we approach patients, how we say what you can do and what you can control. The idea that your fertility is just luck, I think is false. That there's a lot that's underlying when it comes to inflammation. That means there's a lot of lifestyle factors you can control, and that there's some factors you can't, but it's not luck. It's actually, disease that's just not getting diagnosed. There's a lot of people falling into this unexplained world. And that's really what led me to start talking about it online and to, grow this platform, which is, to me, I was always thought people wouldn't want to talk about their fertility, right? It wasn't something people were doing. And I think what we're understanding is that women especially are desperate to understand their bodies better. We have to be our own advocate for our healthcare now, that we've got to ask physicians for certain things, that we can't just live in a world where it's going to be checked or our symptoms are going to be taken seriously. And so arming people with data and education and information so that you can be a better advocate for your own health is something I'm so passionate about. And I'm glad to see that the world, in the past decade since I've been online, we've had such a culture shift to how we even talk about our health. And I love seeing this change. I think my field is one of the last to come to it because fertility is totally reactive and not preventive at all. But I'm a proponent of being more proactive when it comes to the fertility and the hormone space.
So tell everybody, and we'll have it in the show notes, but where to find you online?
Yes, I'm on Instagram, TikTok at Natalie Crawford, MD. And I also host the As a Woman podcast. And then I've got a book called The Fertility Formula, which is available for pre-sale at nataliecrawfordmd.com/book. You can find out all kinds of details about it. And it's a lot about what we're covering today is just even more in detail in the book.
Well, I do want to talk about the book, and I think that the book will be a great way for us to talk about a lot of the things I wanted to cover in any case. But first, I want to hear why you decided to write a book. So you have this great online platform, but presumably that's like shorter sort of clips. And maybe this is a way to go deeper, but I want to hear your story.
So yes, right. We think we both know that, social media, you get somebody's attention for just like a moment of their time. And when we're talking about complex topics like hormones and your fertility, there's so much information that builds off of itself that is really hard to get from an Instagram reel. I mean, that's the why I started the podcast to say, oh, I'm going to do a deep dive on some of these topics. But even with that, I found, okay, well, people, you're grabbing what you need, but there's a lot of information that you need that you don't know you need. And it's very hard to teach somebody all of this information in these segments. And so I've had this desire to write a fertility book for a long time. I started working on the book in 2018, which is kind of guiding somebody progressively through all the information I want people to know. And I wish I had had when I was back at that stage, these real life questions, really explaining your body, your hormones, your fertility, what to do, warning signs, abnormal cycles, cycle tracking. Oh my gosh, nobody talks about that in the way that we should early enough. But also more than that, talking about what you can do about it all and how inflammation impacts your body in such a profound way, what you can do when it comes to your lifestyle. And half the book is really diving into natural fertility and what I'm passionate about, talking about all these different lifestyle tenets and your diet and sleep and stress and exercise and environment and how that impacts your fertility and also what you can do about it. Because I think so often we get inundated with facts and it doesn't feel very achievable to really make meaningful change, and really trying to flip the narrative and say, when it comes to your hormones and the world around you, every little change you make matters, right? Your true fertility and your hormonal health is the sum of all of these decisions. And if you can approach your life in a different, more proactive way, saying, the majority of days, the majority of choices I make are going to be ones that serve me well and are going to work to decrease my inflammation, then you give your body the space to say, I'm going to have cake on this day. And it's not a big deal because your body has the reserves to tolerate these short little insults. But if we are constantly not sleeping and overdoing it and eating really terrible food and worsening our gut health and causing insulin resistance, those same little choices like the piece of cake actually make a huge negative impact in our body. And so we've for too long, and fertility doctors are part of the reason to blame, have really viewed like modern medicine over here, lifestyle medicine over here. And I hate that approach because to me, there's space for all of it together. It's all actually very important. And I think that there's more we can do even earlier in the journey when it comes to understanding how our bodies work and how those choices we're making really do influence how our hormones function.
So it sounds like this book is great for anybody who is either currently having an issue with fertility, but actually, ideally, women who are not even yet thinking about fertility to read, because the reason that I wanted to do this whole series on wellness is I'm actually in my 50s now, so I'm going through menopause. I'm past the fertility phase. But for me, this is the time, actually, I feel like there's been so many changes and things that used to work aren't working. And I'm really focusing on what are these maybe small changes, but over a long period of time can have a big impact. And it sounds like the same is true for fertility, that read this book if you know you want to have children, like much before you even thinking about it, so that you understand your body as a system.
Yes.
And you understand what changes you can make much in advance to help you through that process. Is that fair?
That is completely accurate. And that's truly who the book is. The perfect avatar for the book is somebody who says, I'd love to have kids one day, but not now. But they want to do something, right? Instead, we want to say, well, hey, this is a life goal. I'll plan for my other life goals. What can I do for this one? And we know that, a lot of these, especially inflammatory changes and choices, inflammation builds up over your body over the long run. And so if you can make changes earlier in your life, if you can understand your cycles earlier, you can prevent pregnancy, get pregnant faster, have an easier time. And if you find yourself in the place where you are having infertility like I did, or you're having infertility treatments, you're going to be more well prepared for that journey. You're not going to have to catch up on the basics. I see patients who have to, in a 1-hour visit, learn about the basics, then learn about infertility and learn about treatment. And it is so much information coming at you. If we allow ourselves the time to kind of understand this baseline fund of knowledge, and then when you're going through the hard stuff, those chapters are there for you too, right? So you can reference them back if you're going through the hard stuff and what questions should I ask and what IVF protocol do I need? That's there too. So the book is really written for you at all the stages, right? You just want your hormones to function better. You want to understand your cycle. You want to prevent having some of these bad things happen. that's the perfect person for it. But because a lot of us are older, it's also if you're in the middle of the journey, it's going to help you at that stage too. IVF, you're going through this stuff. You've got to control all the factors you can because so much of it's now out of your hands, right? So much is about the lab and your doctor and that relationship and knowing what to ask is so important. But we want to make sure that, even if it's only 20%, but that 20% that you can make a difference, you deserve to know what those factors are too. So to me, it's the fertility book. It's the one book you need on your shelf. It's going to cover all of this stuff. It's going to give you the plan for what you can do, but it's also going to prepare you for these different stages of life as well.
So can you talk a little bit about a couple of maybe the foundational sort of tenets of things that you can do? So a couple of things that I'm thinking of are your environment. So I have a friend here in Park City, Dana Grinnell, who has a store called Free Living Co. And it's like all non-toxic products. So she does all of the research for your home and your body. And after having her on my podcast, I've like completely switched over my house because these are things, some of them, like what you're washing your clothes with, the dishes that you're eating on, the sheets you're sleeping on, the cleaning products that you're cleaning your house with. A lot of people have their sort of like favorites.
Yes.
And then also, I don't think people understand the importance and how the chemicals in some of these products that are not non-toxic can affect our bodies, our cycles, and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Ashley, when I started doing research on natural fertility, the first project that I got that was all mine was working with the Environmental Protection Agency and looking at PFCs or perfluorinated chemicals and their impact on our ovarian reserve and our natural fertility. And this was like more than a decade ago. And so nobody at all was talking about this. And I started diving into the research and I was floored, right? And these are forever chemicals and they're in your water and they're in the Teflon and they're in the receipts and they're in all these things that we are exposed to all the time and the profound and long lasting impact they can have, especially on our hormones. And I remember your story reminded me of it. I'm in my kitchen, came home from fellowship and we're having infertility and I'm literally like making a pile. Like we are getting rid of all of this stuff after I'd spent a day, working with the EPA. And my husband came and he's like, what's going on? And I was like, no, you won't. I was like, just like a light switch flip. Like one, oh my gosh, there's so much research that people are just not talking about. And two, but this is normal. Everybody cooks on nonstick pans and Teflon. And like, what are you talking about? So yes, I think to that point, we are exposed to so many small insults every day. And I always like to think they all have different ways that they can impact our body. But the easiest connecting thread is to say they're all causing chronic inflammation. They're all activating our immune system to chronically be fighting them off, whether it's toxins or, a true inflammatory insult. And when we are constantly exposed to them, your body's never getting a rest and your brain is not necessarily interpreting this as the best place to get pregnant, or even to simplify it from that, this inflammation is interfering with your brain's ability to interpret what is truly happening in your body. Our hormones are a dynamic system. They communicate and they change. And if your brain can't get good signal in because of these endocrine disruptors, it's not going to send out the right signal. And then you are going to have some of these hormonal changes. You're going to say things aren't normal. I'm feeling fatigued and bloated and my cycle's starting to get off. So the world around us is so impactful. And this comes from, toxins that are environmental toxins, like we're talking about from PFCs and BPA. If we think in that world specifically from the environmental world, yeah, some of the top sources are going to be your kitchen's probably the number one source where most people are actually having a negative impact from what you're cooking in, what you're putting in the dishwasher, the microwave. Anything that gets heated specifically is going to be problematic. And people don't think about, they go to Starbucks and there's a paper cup, but there's a plastic lid on top that your hot liquid is just coming through every time. Your to-go ware that you're putting your food in and you're meal prepping and you're spending so much time making that healthy meal, but the dish you take it to work in matters too, right? Because chemicals leach out of that. And so we really want to be looking in your kitchen and having things be, in glass when it can, or looking at stainless steel or really trying to simplify what you're drinking out of or what you're using, especially for heating. If we're on the stove, stainless steel is great, or cast iron. We really want to be eliminating some of the nonstick cookware that is literally a chemical coating. Food packaging doesn't get enough notice either, right? So when we talk about, we'll say the food that you eat is a great way to combat the chemicals that you're exposed to, right? Fruits and vegetables have great fighting properties for some of these toxins. They're high in nutrients and fiber, which can heal your gut. But ultra processed foods, in addition to being made with chemicals, they're artificial foods. They wreck your gut. They cause insulin resistance. They wreck your hormones, but they're also packaged in packaging that is toxic as well. And so you really get such a double hit from what we call the ultra processed foods. And unfortunately, those are cheaper foods. Those are convenience foods. We live a crazy life and, we're grabbing easy things. Those choices add up over time. You're getting takeout. I mean, how many people love ordering food that just comes to their door right now? But the containers that they're putting your warm food in is just leaching chemicals in. And so I understand that can be a really convenient option, but you got to take it out of there. Like, don't eat it out of the to-go food, right? Put it on a plate. If you're not ready to eat it, change it over to a glass dish immediately. This is why cooking food at home is by far going to be the best thing that you can do. The majority of your meals should be meals that you cook at home. They don't have to be complex. They should have whole foods in them. And those two things are going to cover, obviously that's the first place to tackle because you can make the biggest difference there. But there's so many other things, like you mentioned, your cleaning solutions, the beauty products. I mean, I'm guilty of this too, because we do have favorites and people don't want to give up their favorites. So I always say, like, you don't have to go swoop through your house and change everything at once, but you should look at tackling different areas, different weeks, or when it comes to beauty products at a minimum, say, well, when this one runs out, I'm not going to rebuy it. I'm going to buy a new shampoo and conditioner that is not made with phthalates in it and not going to be as hard for me. And, there are good resources to help you when it comes to beauty products. We can look at the EWG, the Environmental Working Group. It's got a great resource where you can look up your products and see their safety score, research ones that could be better for you. And I think that is going to simplify things and make it better. It's a long game. And I think that's something, though, that's just the world we live in. When I think about how I've divided kind of the lifestyle section of the book, is I've said, okay, there is what I call the foundation of your day. And this is sleep, exercise, and stress. This is the core part that probably most of us don't do well that we could. That's going to be, number one. Number two is going to be what you put in your body. That's going to be your food, your water, your supplements. And then number three is going to be the toxins that we're exposed to, environmental toxins like we're talking about, but also toxic behaviors, right? We've got smoking, alcohol, marijuana, caffeine. I mean, there's so many different stimulants or suppressants that people are exposed to also. And I think we really have to look at that with we have toxins, we've got, the food and water that goes in our body, and then we've got how we set up the foundation of our day. And that's what I try to break down and show the data on how that impacts us, but also what can you do about it to really make it not feel so overwhelming? Because I know when you hear this, you're like, I just can't change everything. So instead I'm going to change nothing.
Right.
But that's not what data supports. Every little choice that you make in the positive way actually does matter and makes an impact.
And data says the same thing. First of all, like, no shame. We all have favorite things. Like, we might not be able to get rid of our favorite mascara or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And she's like, just keep that. If that's something you really love, just try to make like one change at a time, like you're saying. So you can either maybe start in the kitchen, because that's such like a dangerous place in some sense. And then maybe you think about your laundry room, and you can think about it in different places in your house. So I love this idea of separating into sort of segments and then what can I do about it? And I also really love this idea that small changes matter. Do you give people, I also think different things work for different people.
Yes.
So do you cover that in the book? Because I feel like, and also I should say, different things work for different people at different times in their lives. So like for me, intermittent fasting used to work. Now it's not really working for me. And that's probably hormonal and whatever.
Yeah.
So, I've had to find in my 50s what works now that's different from what worked before. But I also am thinking now, what I'm doing now, where I've cut out like sugar and processed foods and, I eat very low carb, I probably would have been helpful to my health earlier, even if it wasn't related to my weight earlier. Mm-hmm. So it's, anyway, maybe you can comment on some of this.
Absolutely. I think we have to acknowledge that our body changes over time, right? And so we do have different needs at different stages of our life. Anybody reading the book is going to need something different. They're going to be in different stages of their life, of their day, of their health journey, their reproductive life. The core tenet for me, and what I feel like the whole book works up to, is going to say, hey, your fertility is a marker of your overall health. Inflammation is impacting your health and your fertility and your hormones. And 2, there's a lot more you can do about it than what you've been told. But I really want to say a lot of it is learning to listen to your body, learning what the clues are for when your body is being exposed to something inflammatory. What are the clues that your hormones are giving you or your menstrual cycle is giving you? And how do you make changes based on that? If we look at something as important as stress, right? And stress is always a touchy topic because people don't want to say, oh, yeah, I'm stressed about being stressed. I mean, but if we think about it just from a very physiologic standpoint, people didn't used to have the stress that we have now, right? Stress would be that came from, I see a bear and let's run away. And our bodies have a stress response purposefully to preserve ourselves. So if you were living in a famine and weren't getting enough food, your stress response would kick on so that you wouldn't reproduce because we're trying to just survive. But chronic stress that we let ourselves have every day because we're like working all hours, we're not getting enough sleep, we're not moving our body, we're very sedentary, but also we just feel so much pressure. There's more online, we're exposed to this news cycle in today's world, right? There's so much that's contributing to it. What we could each do to feel better from that is so vastly different, right? And so that's why this research is so varied. And we have to say, hey, these things can be true. This can be important, but there's no one answer for it. And so I always say for stress, we'll use this one. My goal is for you to have the feeling. Like we all know that there are things we can do that give us that, right? It's not on our phone, it's something else, but what's going to work for you and what works for me, those things may be really different and that's okay. The goal is to carve out the time for that, to say, hey, in this whole day that I have, 20 minutes of my day, I can say, I'm going to do something for me to give me that feeling, because that feeling is my cortisol lowering. And I know that cortisol is inflammatory. I've got to lower it for my brain to be able to function properly and my hormones to work. What gives me that? Maybe it's journaling, maybe it's a walk outside, maybe it's your feet in the grass, and maybe it's a bath, and maybe it's yoga, maybe it's meditation, or maybe it's acupuncture, maybe it's therapy. We're all different, and that's okay.
Yeah. Amazing. I mean, I think I love this idea, like learn you. And I actually think that that's probably like the learning from all this whole wellness series is like, we are all different. What works for you is not necessarily going to work for me. And that's part of the problem with Instagram. It's like these quick fixes. And if you do this, if you eat that, if you do this exercise, and it's like, it's just not true.
I always say if it was that simple, I mean, like, yes, right? I mean, I would have no patients in my office and it would be amazing, if it was truly that simple. But I think it all speaks back to that it is the sum of things that makes the whole. And, we are the one who knows ourselves the best, or we have the opportunity to know ourselves the best. Your body gives you clues and gives you signs. And the question is, are you listening and do you know how to listen? This is one of the issues we'll say with birth control, right? Is that the birth control pill is not inherently bad. It does not cause infertility. It does not, cause you to run out of eggs any faster or go into menopause earlier. But it takes away your menstrual cycle, which we always say is your fifth vital sign. It is one of the easiest ways for women to know that their hormone system is communicating appropriately. And we have lost that when we have hormone contraception on board. Well, that doesn't mean that the contraception is bad, but it means that you've lost the ability to determine certain red flags or warning signs. And so what are you going to do about that? You have to acknowledge that that's there. You have to really learn to listen to the other signs. You have to know when to maybe stop that and see what your body is giving you. And so that's one thing I hate, is that we have a generation of women who have been on, we'll say, the pill or an IUD, and they've lost their menstrual cycle, which has been fine and that is not harmful, but they've lost the ability. All these years they could have learned about their body or learned to track their cycles or potentially detected something wrong earlier. They lost. And that doesn't mean it's the wrong choice, because nobody wants to be in the position to have, a pregnancy if they're not ready to do so. But we have to know that, we've lost that sign and give ourselves the time to get it back, learn if it's normal, and learn how to see when we're ovulating and learn about our body at an earlier time frame than when we're having problems down the road.
When do you spend the most time with the people you love? For us, it's at home. around the dinner table with family, or sipping cocktails in the living room with friends. So why not make that time even more meaningful by imbuing your gatherings with pieces that not only make connecting easier, but spark conversation around your table? Amaton's collection of small batch, artisan, quality-made pieces for tabletop and home are not only made for simple serving, they're works of art designed for daily use. Whether you're hosting a dinner party or sitting down for family game night, our collections create a sense of presence and peace in every home. Shop our collection of dinnerware, drinkware, serveware, and more at amatond.com. That's AMEATENDRE.com. Gather by design.
Well, yeah. And even when a doctor prescribes the pill, for example, to have that conversation with their patient about, whenever it is you actually do want to try to get pregnant, you need to be aware that you're losing this sort of fifth sense or whatever you called it, and that you might want to stop and move to another form of birth control X years or months in advance, because nobody certainly had that conversation with me.
I mean, we really stop the pill and then just start trying, right? And there's no talk in between. And there's kind of this online myth, if we're talking about the birth control pill, like, oh, you should stop it months in advance so it can wash out of your system, or that you need to buy expensive cleanses for the pill. I mean, that is not true. The pill is very short acting. Even missing one birth control pill can result in a pregnancy or an escape ovulation. But the reason to stop the pill months before is so that you have an opportunity to see your cycle and track your cycle and identify cycle abnormalities to then intervene or get a diagnosis earlier if things are not working well.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think a lot of us have heard about is that how clinical trials historically have been predominantly full of white men, which doesn't serve women particularly well, or ethnic groups. Have you seen disparities in how chronic conditions that affect women like PCOS or endometriosis are studied or treated compared to other health issues? And are you seeing a change in that?
Yes and no. I mean, definitely yes to the first part. We 100% see that, women's health conditions are drastically understudied as compared to conditions that affect either men alone or both sexes. Things like uterine fibroids, endometriosis, PCOS. There is just limited data for how long we've known about these diseases and limited options. We are seeing a bigger emphasis on learning about them. I think we have to be honest that true research that's going to make a meaningful difference takes years and years, right? Even though we're seeing more research dollars start to be spent, more of a focus on talking about things like even menopause and fibroids and endo. It's going to be a decade before we see the result of that literature in any meaningful way to make a change. So it's in the right direction, but it definitely is a place that it puts women at a disadvantage when it comes to our health. We do have limited, true, perfect evidence-based data. If we compare women's health to cardiology, where they have some of the best studies that have ever been done, of course, because heart disease impacts men so much more, they've got very robust data. I think it's important to keep in mind, this is something I say all the time, because I'll sometimes hear from my colleagues, oh, well, there's no study on that, so how do you say that? Or that hasn't been 100% tested. And I said, just because there's no perfect study done doesn't mean that something's not impactful or meaningful. And sometimes we have to look at the research that does exist and try to draw the best conclusions we can from the data that we do have. And we can acknowledge limitations, like nutritional data, for example, is extremely hard to study because it's very difficult to control somebody's entire diet. And so most of the data is observational, where somebody's recording what they're eating, and then we're trying to look at trends in patients who either eat more vegetables or eat less vegetables, or they eat red meat or they don't eat red meat. But it doesn't mean that it's not important data and that it doesn't hold truth that these things are important in your health and in your life.
Okay. Well, let's hope that in the years to come, we'll have better clinical studies.
We're hoping.
Women's health. Yeah. Can you tell us something lesser known about living with hormonal conditions that may often be understood or not understood at all?
I think, one thing that many people do not realize is that, and hopefully we start to talk about more, you're born with all the eggs you're ever going to have, and you lose the majority of the eggs before you're ever born, right? So when you are a 20-week baby inside your mom, you have 6 to 7 million eggs. You only have 1 to 2 million at birth. And then by the time you even start puberty, that number's dropped to 250,000. So most of the eggs you're going to lose over the course of your life happen well before you ever started a period. And the reason why that is just so striking and shocking is it's really going back to underlying the factor that your eggs are in your body your whole life. They are absorbing the wear and tear of the world around you. There's things that your mom did when she was pregnant with you that will impact your entire life that you have no control over. So there's no blame to this. But there is just attention to saying the earlier you can learn about these factors, the more important it will be to your hormonal health, especially your reproductive hormones. I love more attention to menopause and perimenopause, but we're seeing more women going into menopause earlier. We're seeing more premature ovarian failure. We're seeing more what we call diminished ovarian reserve, which is essentially perimenopause even earlier when you're trying to get pregnant. We're also seeing a 50% drop in sperm counts in 50 years. We're seeing an increase in miscarriage rates, an increase in infertility. Clear data that the world around us is impacting our entire reproductive system like we talked about. But I think for your hormones specifically, when your ovaries are your hormone producing factory and those eggs that, are the ones really kind of controlling your ability to make hormones have been in your body your whole life, it's just further attention to saying, hey, we need to start talking about this at a much earlier stage than just when you want to get pregnant. And for those of us who are past our reproductive years, really being mindful about helping talk about the hormone changes that come in peri and in menopause, because that will influence the younger generation to care more at an earlier age as well.
Have you thought about what would be an optimal time to start talking with girls about fertility and their hormones and all of these things? Like, is it in grade school, like through school, or have you thought about that?
Yeah, I think honestly, to me, I think the best time is when people are leaving college, in reality, because you're at a stage where you're making life decisions and you're thinking about big picture to your life, where you can really process some of the information in a more mature way. I definitely think with younger, in our grade school years and our teenage years, it's really important to talk about our fertility as far as this is how our body works. These are the anatomical names for parts of our body. Your period's more than just bleeding,
Right.
Really thinking about that. What is an ovulation? What are eggs? And having that sex ed discussion in a much more comprehensive way at an earlier age does bring that foundational knowledge up so that when we want to talk about things like fertility and egg quality and egg counts in your 20s, it's not shocking information at that point. But I feel like that's the time when you're leaving college that you're more able to grasp what you might want your life to look like and be really thinking about how these choices you're making can influence it.
That makes sense. From your experience, what's one of the most powerful things women can do to support their long-term reproductive health?
Sleep more. I think it's the first thing. It's the first thing that we go when life gets hard. It is the first thing that we will not do. We'll go to bed late. We'll get up early. We will get up early and work out hard, when we're not even resting. The way I like to think about it, if we think about it in that foundational sense though, is that sleep is when your body resets. It is when your brain is allowed to kind of set the game plan for the day. But it's also when we're healing from the inflammation that we've been exposed to that day. So if you're not giving your body appropriate healing time, you are not going to be able to have the next day go as well as it can. And these things build on each other. So I think that's the number one thing as we think about sleep. I got in bed at this time, but I'm on my phone, or my partner was watching TV, or the room was still brighter. It was too hot, or I woke up 20 times. And sleep is a complex topic, but I think we've got to set the environment for sleep. That means a cooler room. It means a dark environment. I love a sleep mask, a sound machine. We want to put our electronics. I know mine go over there, go somewhere away from your bed so that you're not just right there and can't grab it right away. And really when you need to get up, get sleep. And if you are not going to get enough sleep, 8 hours is great. 7 is the minimum. Don't get up earlier, especially not to work out or to do something exertional in the basis of health, because the sleep is going to make a bigger impact than getting on the treadmill and getting less sleep.
So many of us would prioritize our exercise, I think, over our sleep. And it sounds like sleep is worth more, or the minimum amounts of sleep are worth more than adding on the exercise.
Than any gains from exercise. Absolutely. We know that skeletal muscle is your biggest organ in your body. It's going to be the biggest organ you have to fight your inflammation and to fight against insulin resistance. And that when it comes to exercising for hormonal health, weight training and strength training should be the core of your day.
Yeah. And I do think that's being talked about a little bit more.
We're seeing it more.
For
at least for menopause,
50s.
definitely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely. What do you hope readers will take away from the fertility formula?
I love that question. I hope people can take away that, your fertility is more than luck, that your fertility is a state of your own, of your health, that it deserves acknowledging and listening and learning about how your body works, that you deserve that. You deserve to understand your body, but also that there's more that you can do about how your body works and your hormonal function than what you've previously been told.
I love that. Can you share a story, maybe a meaningful success or something unexpected that has really stayed with you in your practice?
My patient stories are so meaningful. I will say one that comes top of mind when you're asking about that is I saw a physician patient who came to me and she was 32 and she was in training and she stopped her birth control and she didn't have a period and was told, oh, that's normal after coming off the birth control, no big deal. And then went in for testing and found out she had essentially an undetectable AMH, which is one of the blood tests to see if you have any eggs left. So was told that she was an ovarian failure, had no eggs left, and that donor eggs were her only option. And so she was told that by another fertility doctor, and she came to me, had a friend who said, oh, why don't you see Dr. Crawford, just get another opinion, which of course, if somebody is telling you something dramatic, always get another opinion. This is your health at the end of the day, not theirs. And she came to see me and I said, these tests, do look like you're an ovarian failure, or at least at the very end of your egg supply, but you're young, you've never tried. We absolutely can give it a try. A lot of fertility clinics won't do that because if you don't get somebody pregnant, that hurts your success rates. They have a lot of criteria to allow somebody to even try IVF. She didn't qualify to do IVF at this clinic. I told her there's no guarantees. We may not respond, but then we can always move on knowing we gave it our all. We ended up doing 3 cycles of IVF, had 4 normal embryos. She's got a 2-year-old right now and about to get pregnant with her second baby. Oh. So I think that the world of probabilities and percentages exists to guide you in making decisions, but especially when it comes to your health, oftentimes something is 0 or 100%. Right? The individual experience is going to be so unique. She did everything I asked of her. I said, you've got to come to the table controlling all of these factors. I'm going to come to the table with the technology that I have, and we're going to walk this road knowing we did everything possible. And she did that, and props to her for knowing that it's an unexpected road. There's no guarantees. But I think that there's a couple things to that story is that she took ownership for it. She got tested earlier than normal would tell her to get tested. And she advocated for herself when she was told something that felt very absolute. She said, I'm going to get another opinion before I just dive into something as extreme. Egg donation is a beautiful way to start a family, but it's not her path. So I think that speaks to a lot of things because we're often hesitant to change doctors. We say, oh, that's what my doctor said, and we just carry on. But in some worlds, like we'll use cancer as an example, it's not unheard of. People get second opinions all the time when it comes to their cancer treatment. And really, when it comes to your health, you should feel like that's your right at any stage of the game. To get another opinion, find a doctor, a care team who you trust. At the end of the day, nobody cares more about your health than yourself, and you're the one who's got to be your biggest advocate.
Well, I think this whole idea of being your own advocate is so important and not what we were taught. I feel like healthcare was extremely paternalistic. I mean, honestly, it's not that long ago. Doctors wouldn't even tell you had cancer. They didn't think you could handle it. So if you think about that and then where we are today, I think the truth is you still find with many healthcare providers this sense of, I know better, don't question me. And I think if that's the case, you need to go elsewhere, right? You need to shop around.
I entered the fertility space well over a decade ago, and there were absolutely physicians who I was, training under who wouldn't even tell somebody their diagnosis. They would just say, this is what you're going to do. We're going to do IVF. They wouldn't explain it, talk about the diagnosis. People had no idea what to expect, which I think is just so wrong. At a minimum, you deserve education. You deserve to make informed choices. There's a doctor for everybody. There are people who don't want to know all that information, and I that's their right as well. I love that we're seeing an age of education where people do want to make informed decisions. And so if you find yourself in front of somebody who doesn't think you can handle, the fertility formula and transparency, I wrote this book in 2018, started shopping it around in 2019, and I was told women can't handle bad news. Nobody will buy a fertility book. And I just refused to believe that. I said, but they're listening to me online. As time grew, I just refused it. But I got told no a lot of times by different people, just under this idea about the presumption over what women could handle or what education or information they wanted to learn about. And I'm glad to say that we've really proven everybody wrong. And we see a slew of women's health books right now. And I love this kind of change and focus to saying we are giving people information. And as women, we're able to access information we can trust by healthcare professionals and not just misinformation that we don't know if it's valid or not.
Yeah, love it. So advocate for yourself. Okay, so you do have a hard part of your job where, you try a lot of things and they don't work. Can you just talk a little bit about how you support your patients when things are not going the way that they want, when they're not getting pregnant? And is that, I have a feeling because you went through it yourself, you can be extremely empathetic, which I have to imagine is super helpful. And you also just have like a very warm personality, which not all doctors have. But do you wrap around them ideas of like therapy, or can you just sort of talk us through how you help your patients with coping with not great news?
I think number one, I'm going to say is kind of proactive is setting expectations, right? Even though we said 0 or 100 for any given person, any patient before we do treatment, I try to walk them through what their expected outcome is. This is the most likely scenario. These are the expected success rates. We try to kind of set the stage. This is what I think this is going to be. This is going to be a marathon. We might need multiple cycles. I'm a big fan of what I call the WTF visit, meaning if things aren't going how we want them to go, sitting back down, treat my patients like they are smart enough to get the information. I break down the nitty gritty of the cycle. This is what we learned. This is what we didn't. These are changes I would make. Doesn't mean you have to do another cycle, but this is what I would do, and really kind of break it down for them. When I'm at the place and there's very little I can do, I don't have changes to make, new things to try, that's where I start getting nervous and start wondering, maybe we're not going to achieve success with this treatment option. A lot of infertility is trying this and seeing how we respond and then personalizing it once we get your response and doing it even better. And so acknowledging that that is a name of the game. But when we get to the place and we've tried these different things and we're not getting the outcome we want, it's devastating, trying to set boundaries on when do we have to make a different choice versus when can we keep moving forward. I always say, there's no right or wrong choice. And I think that's really important, especially for women who are often brought up in a world where we're kind of taught that there is a right choice or we need to be a certain way or do a certain thing. Here's what happened. Here's what I would change. Here's what I recommend. Here's all the choices you could make going on. And there's no right or wrong choice, but the choice is yours to make, and helping them kind of understand that and putting the ball in their court, really making that idea that we're making that choice together. I'm a huge fan of therapy. I'm a huge fan of that we're doing this together. I always try to get, partners on the call, partner all together, everybody in office, because it's a really hard road to walk alone. It's really an easier load to bear if we share some of that. And it's hard because often we have infertility, we're feeling further away from our normal support system than normal. If we have friends who are achieving success, they have babies in their life and we wanted to be there, we lost a baby and it would have been that kid's age, we start to feel like we're further apart from them than ever. That's why I say, there's a wonderful community online of people who have had infertility. We call it the Worst Club with the best members. They rally around each other. There's education and you're not alone. Infertility is actually a quite common experience. It can feel very isolating and alone, but knowing that you aren't alone, I think knowing that your doctor has your back and you're a team together really matters. Because at the end of the day, you've got to feel confident enough in the plan that you trust, right? Because I can't control the outcome. I try my hardest. I'm a controlling girl by nature, but I can't control every outcome, right? IVF, in my best, perfect embryo, perfect uterus, I'm going to have a 65% chance of success per transfer. And those numbers are not great. They're amazing for where the field has come, but that means many people will have an embryo transfer that will not have success. And that's okay too. That's a part of the story. But trying to kind of say, we want to know that we look back on this, not wishing we'd made different choices, and that we feel really confident that this was the road we had to walk to get to the outcome we're going to get.
Well, at the end of every episode, I like to ask my guests the same questions. But before I get there, is there anything you want to say about either your book or your practice, or that you would like to leave listeners with?
Oh, I love that. I will say this about the book right now, because it is in pre-sale right now, which I know is like so frustrating for a fertility book, that in the pre-sale stage, we do have two pre-sale incentives that are with it. One is what I've called the hormone reset, where I take all that lifestyle information and try to put it into a more condensed version of the what can you do right now, kind of the hormone primer when it comes to your lifestyle. So I think that's very helpful for everybody who might hear this and say, what can I do? And then I'm also including right now, I have an online course called the IVF Guide. So if you are in that person who's in the midst of infertility, I want to give you some resources to support you right now when it comes to protocols and questions to ask. And so you're going to get those resources right now from pre-ordering the book, even though the book's not going to be in your hands until the spring. But then I do have a ton of information online. I do have the As a Woman podcast, which has a lot of really great educational episodes as well for somebody to like learn more about if they are struggling right now in the moment or just want to take more ownership over their body.
Okay. Remind us where to go online, and then also tell us a little bit more about the podcast.
Absolutely. So if you want to look for the Fertility Formula, you can find that anywhere books are being sold, or also on nataliecrawfordmd.com/book. And then the As a Woman podcast has over 5 million downloads. It's been around since 2019. We're really talking about fertility, health, hormones. It's solo episodes, but also, some with experts talking about really looking at your fertility, but your health and your hormones when it comes to longevity and a lot of these actionable items as well. So our latest season just got released. So we're in season 3 right now, which we're finally doing video episodes and we're recording in person. And it's very exciting. The podcast world, it's the long game when it comes to the podcast, but Absolutely. It's a great resource.
Okay, 5 questions for you. Number 1, as we explore in my brand, Âme attend, which stands for to take care of your soul in French, objects can hold a lot of meaning for us. They can tie us to the past, enable us to be more present, or even take us into the future. Can you share an object from your life, whether you still have it or not, that holds a lot of meaning for you, and tell us why?
Yeah, so I moved around a lot when I was younger. My grandparents had a lake house out in East Texas that I always felt more like home than any one home that we had. And they don't have the lake house anymore, but I have this photo that they had, this art piece that, always hung at the top of the stairs that was very meaningful for me as a child. We always got banished upstairs and always spent our time up there. And so when they were kind of dividing up things after my grandparents died, I was like, I want that picture because it just brings this sense of like home and family, and it hangs in our living room now here in our house. So that's just always meaningful to me. I didn't ever have that in like my childhood home. So the lake house always felt like that to me.
I love that. Can you share a favorite tradition with us? It could be something from when you were a child or something you do with your family today, anything at all.
I love traditions. They're so special to me. Christmas is one of our biggest ones. And I know, everybody has different traditions, but my favorite one that we do with my kids is kind of based off when I did as a child, but we do an activity advent calendar. So every year, we have different family-based activities that we do through the month of December. So whether it's make cookies or go ice skating or deliver gifts to, a variety of different things. The kids have no idea what's coming every day. And so they've done it their whole life. And it's always, they get so excited, even though they're older now, that when it comes out, and it's fun to do some of these things they may not still do as much, even though they're a little bit older, that they bring back those good memories to them. And so that to me is one of my favorite things too, to be the parent on the end of making the magic of the holidays.
I love that. I hope you continue it, even when they're teenagers.
I know. I'm going to make them. It's going to be like, we're coloring a Christmas picture today, guys.
Are you in a phase in your life where you enjoy entertaining in your home?
Yeah, because I don't like to go places anymore. I love to entertain in our home. I think part of it is also that since I didn't grow up in like one home and we were moving a lot younger, we didn't always entertain in the house. And to me, it feels so warm to have people. I love having the holidays in our house. I love having, our friends over just for like a dinner at night. I wish I could be a perfect dinner to like have the picture perfect tablescape and like that's not the vibe. It's casual and just about together time. But I would love to have people over to our house 100 times over going to a restaurant.
Yeah, I love it too. I think it's just about the time together. It's not, people get stuck on like the perfect meal or the perfect tablescape. And honestly, it's not about that. It's really about the quality of the time that you can spend together. Do you have 1 or 2 top resources? You can tell us about your book and your website again, but also throw in maybe 1 or 2 other favorites.
Okay, well, I have a ton of favorites on this one. I knew this. I have got the Book of Alchemy. I don't know if you have read this one. It's back here on my bookshelf, and it's a journaling prompt book. I do find journaling / brain dumping to be very therapeutic for me and a great way for me to reduce stress. But I love it. So the Book of Alchemy. And when it comes to nonfiction or health books, I mean, this is one people I'm sure are going to say, I mean, Mary Claire Hay was a great friend. So I love The New Menopause. That is such a great resource to be talking about, especially menopause and hormone changes that we're going through as many of us are getting kind of to an older age. But I have so many friends who are writing health books too. So I think I'm so swayed and amazing. I will say Ali Cohen has written Detox. I don't know if you've read that book or if you've had her on the show yet. It's fabulous. She's a rheumatologist, and it is all about the environmental chemicals and how they impact your body and your health. And her book Detox is a fabulous resource. So I'll highlight that one.
Amazing. I'm going to buy it. Last question. What do you do for yourself? Do you have a practice, a focus, a habit, or daily routine that contributes to your success or just your well-being?
I love it. So I am a morning person. I love to get up before my family is up. I have a night owl husband, so I'm always up before him. I love to journal in the morning. I love to have coffee outside. Like the bird noise is very therapeutic for me. And I'm a list person. Like even though our whole world is online, even right in front of me right now, I've got a planner every day. I like to think about the things I need to do, think about what's realistic to do. And it kind of allows me to do that at the start of the day and set the day off in order to get tasks done and not just kind of be frazzled the whole day. But for me, the journaling, the moment outside, days where I can't do that, there's a noticeable difference.
Dr. Crawford, thank you so much for joining me today. I've learned so much. It's been such a pleasure talking with you. I know you'll be helping so many listeners.
Ashley, thank you so much for having me. It's been a joy.
Thanks for listening to an episode of On the Table with Ashley. Subscribing to, rating, and reviewing our show helps us to continue to make quality episodes. So please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. On the Table with Ashley is presented by Amatond, an elevated, everyday, luxury home and tableware brand with products designed to cultivate connection. You can learn more about Amatond at amatendre.com or on Instagram at Amatond. By subscribing to our newsletter on the Amatond website, you'll receive updates on new episodes as well as promotions relating to Amatond and Amatond's products. Send us an email at reachoutanytime@amatond.com if you have ideas for guests or series ideas you'd like to pass along. Thanks for listening.